welcome back, listeners, to the Mindful Living podcast, the space where we uncover the secrets to living with intention, purpose, and joy. I'm your host, Sana, and today's episode is for all the dreamers out there, especially those who are feeling stuck, stressed, or they're uncertain about how to turn their big vision into a reality. Now, what if I told you that the key to success isn't just about doing more, but it's all about becoming more? And our guest today, Dominiece Clifton, believes that transformation starts from the inside out. Well, she's a clarity coach, business strategist, and the creator of the 4% formula, a game changing approach to achieving consistency and success by dedicating just 1 hour, 1 hour, listeners, a day to yourself. 15 minutes on mindset, 30 minutes on movement, and 15 minutes on spirit. Now, Dominique has lived this transformation herself, listeners. 7 years ago, a spiritual awakening set her on her healing journey that led her to release childhood trauma, find her purpose, and empower women entrepreneurs to escape the trap she calls the entrepreneurial confusion loop. From regulating the nervous system to building clarity and confidence, Dominique is here to share actionable insights that will help you to reduce stress, find alignment, and build a thriving life and business. Plus, she is also a proud mom of two beautiful girls, so she knows all about balancing life's chaos with calm. So, with that, Dominique, welcome to this show, and I can't wait to dive into this conversation with you.
Thank you so much for having me. Can I just say that I do a lot of podcasts, and that might be the best introduction I have ever gotten. So thank you all for putting that together so beautifully. I was smiling the entire time as you were reading because I was like, oh my God, like you are describing me so perfectly. So thank you for that, and thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Dominique, for your graciousness. And let's talk about success being an inside out approach, as you say. So, can you explain for our listeners, why focusing on who we need to become matters more than just what we need to do?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I, about 5 years ago, really started to dive into, I was at a space where I, had tried many times before to change habits, health habits, professional habits, and I had always struggled. I would do things for a small period of time and I would always fall off. I was very inconsistent. And I started doing research, to understand, like, how do I set habits that are sustainable? What do I need to do to build habits that actually stick? And I remember reading Atomic Habits by James Clear, and he talks about focusing on the identity of the person that you want to become versus focusing on the outcome. And so what that means, as an example, is oftentimes when we decide we want to do something, and just an easy example is like, okay, I want to, the new year is coming in. It's like, I want to get healthy in the new year. We start thinking about all the things that we need to do. So we start thinking about the fact that we need to go to the gym. We need to, change our diet. We're going to need to meal plan and eat healthy, like all of these sorts of things. Maybe get new gym clothes. Those are outcome driven goals, as opposed to taking a moment to think about, who do I need to become, right? What's a healthy version of myself? What are habits of a healthy person? And how do I begin to embody those habits? So if you think about it, right, you're like, okay, so what is the identity of a healthy person? Okay, so a healthy person values health and wellness. What does that look like? They're mindful about the things that they put into their bodies because they're caring about they're prioritizing and care about their bodies. They're going to value and prioritize going to the gym or moving their bodies, and so they're going to schedule it into their day. When you start to think about the identity, that's the inside out approach, right? You begin to shift the way that you approach your goals, and they're going to last. And so I share that to say that whenever I was approaching anything before, I was always starting with the outcome based approach. And that's pretty topical. Those things, they thrive off of momentum, motivation. And so it's like, when I feel motivated, I do that thing. But if I don't feel motivated, I'm not going to do that. But again, if I'm someone who has said that this is who I am or this is who I'm working to become, regardless of how I feel, I'm going to stick to that thing. And so this, I was learning about, habits and just trying to figure out like, how do I remain consistent? 5 years ago, I was meditating one day and I got this download, this whisper, intuitive whisper that said, it told me every day for the next 90 days, focus on your mind, your body, and your spirit. And I came out of that meditation. I was meditating at the time. I wrote everything down. And for some reason that I can't explain, I felt really excited about this guidance. It was just like, this feels like something, I don't know why, but this feels exciting. And I jumped right into this practice. It was either that same day or the next day I began that 90-day challenge. Now, the first 2 or 3 weeks were really challenging for me to do these things consistently. And I can talk about in a second, like what that looked like. It was really hard, because I hadn't been consistent with anything. After about 2 to 3 weeks of pushing through, right, not quitting during those rough moments of resistance, things started to get easier. The resistance that my mind had been giving me started to like become easier, less resistance. I just started to do the things and I started to feel better, which also made me want to do the things more. And so, Sanaa, when I fast forward to the end of that 90-day period and doing these things, mind, body, spirit practices every single day, I was completely different. I had completely transformed. It was like I had awakened from a fog, right? That I didn't even realize that I was in. And that was really the beginning of my transformation and really the beginning of the path that I'm on today.
Mhm. Mm. Wow. That sounds very inspiring. So how did you journal through these 90 days, when you could compare, what was I maybe a week back and now what I am today. So did you journal through these days or you just felt it?
Yeah, both. So I've been an avid journaler for about 7 years. I've kept journals over the last 7 years. I can go back to like the version of myself that I was 5 years ago, 7 years ago, 3 years ago, and I can read the person that I wanted to become and the things that I wanted to achieve. And it's really beautiful to have that track record because I can see, right, the evolution and the things that I used to pray for or desire coming to life and like me being able to embody those versions of myself now. There was a point where let's just say 5 or 7 years ago, it was really hard to stick to anything, like regardless of if it was personal or professional, I just couldn't keep up with goals. And so I would write in my journal about how I wanted to be more consistent, like how I wanted to keep my word to myself. And fast forward to today, I'm doing those things. And I really credit this 90-day practice for that. There's a 2190 rule that says it takes about 21 days to form a habit, and then it takes about 90 days for it to become a permanent lifestyle change. Now, I didn't know that, right, when I got the guidance, the whisper to do this 90-day challenge, but I really feel like that chunk of time, that 90 days, like solidified in my brain this practice. And it's been almost 5 years. It'll be 5 years in March since I started this practice, and I still do that practice today. And so I journaled every day, right? I journaled consistently through that process. That was a part of the spiritual work for me. But I have journaled just over the years, and it's really beautiful. Journaling is such a beautiful practice to, tap into yourself and to be with yourself. But it's also a really great way sometimes to remind us of how far we have come, because oftentimes we're very future focused and goal driven, and our eyes are always set on the thing that's ahead. And sometimes we don't pause long enough to look back at who we used to be and the progress that we've already made. And journaling is a great reminder of that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Sometimes, people say that I have no idea what I'm going to write when I'm going to journal. So it's like, putting everything into writing, and it gives such a sense of clarity, because I think it's one of the best ways to get a clear perspective of how much we have improved or how much we have come along a long way. So I really loved how you quantified it, like 21 days to form a habit and then 90 days to actually practice that habit. And similarly, as in the intro, when I was reading for you, you have quantified that 1 hour, which will transform our life. You have quantified it into the 4% formula, which is, 15 minutes on mindset, then 30 minutes on movement, and then 15 minutes on spirit. And if you can break this down for us and share why each component is essential for success and clarity.
Yeah, thank you. So, as I stated, this practice began for me in March of 2020, and I had just been doing it. I had told family and friends, close people about it, but it wasn't something for 4.5 years that I was sharing out with the world. But I was doing this practice for myself. So when I started feeling guided, nudged, when spirit started sharing with me, it's time to start sharing this practice out because it's such a transformative practice. I was thinking about how I could share this out to the world in a way that people would remember, right? And also to make it feel tangible and accessible. And so I started thinking about, okay, so there's three parts. There's mind, body, spirit. How much time typically, right, do I spend on these things? And so I started to break it down. I said I spend at least 15 minutes, about 15 minutes a day on mindset. And when I talk about spending time on mindset, what that means is feeding your mind with instructional or inspirational content. So that's something that you're learning from, something that's inspiring you. That could be podcasts such as this that someone is listening to. Maybe it's motivational videos on YouTube, listening to a professional development audiobook. It's being very intentional about the things that you put into your mind and like enriching your mind with things that are going to help you towards your goals. Oftentimes we're not aware of what we're taking in, or we're watching reality TV and wasting time on television. It's like when you think about the mindset piece, it's about being very intentional about what you're taking in, and also even just mindful about what you're consuming on social media or the types of conversations that you're having. But the most important piece is instructional and inspirational content. So listen to or read a book, listen to a podcast for 15 minutes. That's the first part. The second part is 15 minutes of spiritual work. Now, when I say this, I see spiritual work as a twofold process or practice. There is the connection with self, right? Higher self, your soul, however you want to identify, that's a part of spiritual work that brings you the clarity that you need to move through life. And there's also a connection with a higher power. So, however you identify your higher power, God, spirit, source, however you see that higher power, there's that connection also. And so spiritual work looks different for each of us. For me, it's oftentimes meditation, journaling, getting out in nature, very intentional moments of stillness with myself, not distracted by my phone and all of those sorts of things. But for someone else, it might be going for a long bike ride because that's when they can clear their head. Or it might be taking, a nice bath or shower and just allowing yourself to be present. So there's no right or wrong way to connect with yourself. It's just about ensuring that you do that consistently. And what happens is when you start to connect with yourself, you begin to slow down and really take yourself out of fight or flight or survival mode, which is the way that a lot of us tend to exist and we don't realize it. And then you're able to hear from your intuition more clearly. And so now you're starting to get guidance on how to move and how to go through your life, which is clarity about your purpose. And so oftentimes we're moving through life and we're searching and trying to figure out, what it is that we are intended to do, but we don't sit still long enough to get those answers. And that's what that 15 minutes of spiritual work does. And then the last component is daily movement, 30 minutes of daily movement. And again, this is any way that you want to move your body that feels good to you. This doesn't mean that you have to go get a gym membership and work out at the gym. This can be yoga, Zumba, swimming, dance, walking, jogging, like whatever resonates with you. The goal here is just to do that consistently. The beautiful thing about daily movement is that physical movement is the number one way to release stress. It's the top of the list when you think about how to mitigate stress in our lives. So when you're moving your body daily, every single day, you're releasing stress. You don't have that buildup that oftentimes happen that leads to burnout. You're strengthening your immune system. There's a ton of benefits from daily movement. And so when you do all of these things, like when you nurture all of these parts of yourself, I mean, it literally transforms you from the inside out because you're cultivating your spirit. You're working on your mindset and the mental health, and you're working on your physical self every single day. And so those are some of the benefits of the breakdown of the mind, body, spirit components.
Wow. Wow. Lovely. Lovely. So, I think you will be able to relate with this, for busy listeners, who are juggling multiple responsibilities throughout the day. The 4% formula, it emphasizes consistency, 1 hour a day, every day. But at the same time, life can be unpredictable. So, how do you balance the need for structure with the reality that flexibility is sometimes necessary?
Yeah, this is a great question. The first thing I will say is that you have to really prioritize, right? Like you have to make this something that you value, because when you value something, you're going to give it your time and energy. If everyone opens their calendar and looks at their calendar right now, it will show you the things that you value. It'll either show you that you value work, right? There's a lot of work on your calendar, and that's where you're currently placing your value. Maybe there's a lot of family related activities, and like that's what you're placing your value on. And what it's about is like finding balance. It's not to say that those things aren't important, but you also have to make time for yourself. And so there's a few tips that I want to say for anyone who, I mean, all of us are busy. Like all of us have very full schedules. First, I am a full-time entrepreneur. I'm a mama of two girls, young girls. They're 5 and 8, right? So they're school-age children. I'm a co-parenting mom. And so when I have my girls, I have them by myself. I don't have any help. And I still, right, in the midst of this and all these other things that I'm doing, I still make time for this daily practice because it's something that I value, right? Because I've shifted my identity about who I am, and this is important for me. So that's the first thing. You really have to prioritize this and value it. You have to schedule it into your calendar. If you just leave it up to, I'll get to it, right? You're going to forget, you're going to get busy. So you also want to make sure that you put it in your calendar. But it's important to note that this doesn't have to be done all at one time. So if you're listening and you're like, there's no way I can find 1 hour to do all of these things, that's okay, right? You can start with 15 minutes of something in the morning. Maybe in the middle of the day, you do something else. And then maybe the last part of the day, you do something else. And so this doesn't have to be done all at once, but the goal is just to, as much as possible, ensure that you do these things consistently. And the last thing I'll say is start, right? If you're like, I don't have an hour, that's okay. You can't start with 4%, start with 2%. So chop everything in half and go from 1 hour to 30 minutes and just half everything that we've talked about. What's going to happen is when you start to do this practice consistently, you're going to start to feel better and you're going to want to do it more. And so if you only have a few minutes, wherever you are, start with that and just allow yourself to build over time.
Hmm. Makes sense. Makes sense. Also, you have shared how regulating the nervous system is key to healing and clarity. So, why is stress such a barrier to growth, and what role does mindfulness play in overcoming it?
Such a great question. So when we are stressed, we are just like not able to hear from ourselves clearly. One of the things that stress does is that it like shuts off intuition, right? When you are in a survival mode or fight or flight mode, you can't hear from your intuition clearly. You're hearing from the ego. You're oftentimes stressed about things, worried about things. And so you're just out here trying to figure things out on your own. And so I talked about how when you do this spiritual practice consistently and you move your body consistently, it helps to release that stress, right? And so that's extremely important. When it comes to mindfulness, mindfulness is a skill that's developed over time from meditating consistently. And when you are meditating and you're stressed, the only thing that your brain is thinking about is solving the problems, right? So if you sit down and you're stressed, you're only going to be thinking about the bills that need to be paid or, the thing that's going on at work or the thing that's going on with your family. And so you have to get into a space of beginning to allow your nervous system to calm down in the body, right? Mind and body are connected. You have to do practices that begin to allow the nervous system to calm down so that the mind can begin to calm down. And so there's such a deep connection between the two. And it's really important that the physical movement piece becomes important because if you think about it, we experience stress every single day. It might look different every single day. Maybe today it's traffic, maybe tomorrow it's work, maybe the next day it's something else, maybe the next day is something with family. But every single day in our modern day society, we are experiencing stress. Most folks are walking around in a state of survival or what is also known as sympathetic dominance, right? So you think about the nervous system, you have the parasympathetic, which is the relaxed nervous system. And then you have the sympathetic nervous system, which is fight or flight, that stress mode. Most people are walking around stuck in a sympathetic dominance state. So that means that their nervous system has gotten used to being stressed out. There's so many negative benefits of that practice. And so, over time, your body starts to erode from within. It leads to illness and dis-ease and ailments and mental health issues. Like there's just a ton of negative effects of stress if it's unresolved. And so what usually happens is that people are walking around in a fight or flight mode. They don't even know it, right? They've gotten so used to existing and living in that space. And what becomes important about the 4% formula and daily movement is that it's almost like every single day you're starting to chip away at a little bit of that stress. And so instead of burning out, right, because all of the stress builds, it's like hitting the reset button every single day and giving yourself a clean slate, right? So now today I'm not walking into today with yesterday's stress because I've done things to move my body to release. And so all of that plays into the mindfulness piece. Like before I was a somatic practitioner and before I understood stress and trauma, I was burned out constantly. Like I literally lived in a state of burnout and I would get out of it and I would come back into it. And it was just like this habit that I had of like overextending myself. And the reason why I'm so passionate about like movement and this practice is because I've seen how my life has shifted, how much more clarity I have as a result of being able to hear from my intuition clearly and as a result of having a calm nervous system. And so again, mind and body are connected. And so that stress piece is crucial, right? Managing the stress is crucial.
Right, absolutely right. Also, another interesting, point you make is you describe the entrepreneurial confusion loop as the biggest pitfall for business owners. So, can you tell us more about this cycle and how gaining clarity helps, especially women entrepreneurs, break free from it?
Yeah. So for I'm celebrating 5 years of entrepreneurship as this month as we're recording this. And I've like dabbled in entrepreneurship for over a decade, but I really started to take it serious about 5 years ago. And let's just say 4 of those 5 years, I was just existing in a state of confusion. The foundational work that needed to happen when I first jumped into entrepreneurship, 2019, 2020, I didn't get that. I did a lot of coaching programs. I took a lot of courses, a lot of accelerators, but most of those programs, they just assumed that I had that information or they gave me methods to find that information that weren't necessarily the best methods. And so I was constantly putting out messages, trying to find new clients, creating new services, creating new offerings, creating new lead magnets, like updating my website, like all of the things, posting on social media daily. And I wasn't getting the results that I wanted. So not only was that frustrating, but I'm putting so much effort and energy into my business that again, that leads to burnout, like that leads to exhaustion over time. And so I started having conversations as a business coach, a business strategist. I started having conversations with other women entrepreneurs to really understand my ideal client deeply. Like, I don't want to surface level understand. I want to know everything about my ideal client. The only way to do this, it's not Google, it's not, AI. It's about having real conversations with real people in whatever your target audience is. Most coaching programs don't teach you that. They basically tell you to do target market research and you're relying on your imagination to kind of think about what you think people need. And then you create things, you waste time creating things, you put it out and it doesn't resonate with people, right? So no one buys it or people don't buy it at the level that you want. And so this was the cycle that I was stuck in. And then I started talking to other women and they were stuck in a similar place. And so what I ended up realizing was when we don't have clarity, right? We all end up kind of going through the same type of cycle. This is where the confusion loop comes from, the entrepreneurial confusion loop. Essentially what that is it is a cycle that all entrepreneurs, not just women, but any, male, female, any gender finds themselves in when they don't have a clear understanding on who they are, first of all, as a business owner and entrepreneur, who they're serving and what their clients need. When you don't have that base level or foundational knowledge about who you are and your client, all the other things become irrelevant, right? So you're putting out messaging that isn't resonating with the person that you want to reach. You're making services or creating a business that you're not excited about because you don't really understand yourself and your gifts and skills. And so essentially, what I have found is that there are 6 places that we need to have clarity on in order to get ourselves out of this cycle, this confusion loop that we can get stuck in. And so I call this the clarity first framework, right? Because we need clarity first before we start doing all of the other things. And really quickly, I'll just share like the 6 areas of clarity that we need. And I found from having conversations with other people. So first, you need to have a clear vision. You need to be really clear on where you're going before you start. It's the same way whereas if I was taking a road trip, I wouldn't just get on the road and say, we'll see what happens, right? I know that I want to go to California and now I have to figure out how to get there. So you have to be clear about where you're going before you start. The second thing is that you have to have a clear why. You have to understand why this is important and why this drives you, because when it gets hard, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. When the journey becomes challenging, you have to remember your why so that you are rooting yourself in that why for those storms, those tumultuous times. The third thing is that you need to have clear goals. So now that you've identified your destination, you have to understand the steps that are necessary to get there, right? The fourth thing is you need to be clear about who you are as a business owner, because who you are impacts the type of business that you create. It impacts the messages that you put out, right? You have to be authentic. And so in order for that to happen, you have to understand yourself. The fifth thing now, after you've gone through all those things, now you're thinking about who you're serving, right? Now you're thinking about your ideal client, their needs, their desires, their pain points. And then lastly, you think about the solution. That's the how, right? How do I serve them now that I understand them well, now that I understand myself well? The problem with most entrepreneurs is that we jump right to the last two and we start thinking about our customers and our clients and what we want to offer them, and we start creating things. And we haven't done any of the foundational work, and it doesn't work. And that was the space that I got stuck in for years.
Mm. Wow. Wow. That's something very, very interesting, Michelle. And thank you for sharing this. Also, when we talk about the power of healing,
Mm, mm.
our journey, it included deep healing work to overcome childhood trauma and limiting beliefs. So, how important is it to address these deeper wounds before stepping into clarity and success?
Oh my goodness. It's everything. It is everything. I did not realize when I started in my entrepreneurial journey how spiritual the journey is, right? I didn't realize that I had all these unresolved limiting beliefs and traumas and self-doubt until I jumped into it, and then I started coming up against roadblocks. So when you are stuck in a confusion loop, or when you are there's unhealed versions of yourself, and we're always going to be healing. So it's not like you're ever going to get to a point of perfect. But when you have all this unresolved trauma, it shows up in a lot of different ways. So it oftentimes feels like self-doubt, right? So you don't feel like you can do the thing, you don't believe in yourself. You're spinning your wheels, you're trying to figure things out, you're investing time, energy, resources, but you're not really making the progress that you want to make. You oftentimes feel scattered, you waste time. All of these things are a result of an unhealed, unclear version of yourself. And so, in addition to getting clarity, you also have to be working on releasing all of those limiting beliefs, and those mindset shifts have to happen in order for you to move forward. Otherwise, you're going to keep coming up against roadblocks. You're going to keep coming up against roadblocks. And so the mindset piece, going back to the 4% formula, that's why this is important, because once you start to do those daily mindset practices, you now are building a level of self-awareness with the things that are keeping you stuck. You can now see those things. And so somatic practices, or body-centered practices, right? Things that move the body and involve the body in the healing process are really important. Breath work, physical movement, which we talked about,
Yep.
yoga, meditation, all of these things are really beautiful practices that help us to begin to release the stress, the trauma, the limiting beliefs that our bodies are holding on to, so that we can show up in our businesses as the CEOs, that we desire to be. Otherwise, again, and this was my journey for a long time, you will be trying to do the things, but you'll keep running up against roadblocks and pitfalls because there's, subconscious beliefs that are holding you back from taking the action that you need to take.
Exactly, exactly. And I also believe that, although, these are called as hobbies, but, music or maybe dancing, things we actually loved, in our childhood. Like I loved singing and then coloring, painting. I think these can also have, very strong meditative effects on our brain, on our mind, and they can actually help reducing that stress and also give us clarity. It can unlock that creative part of our brain. So, yeah, great.
Totally. Totally agree. Creative expression is essentially what you're describing. There's scientific ways to release stress, and we've talked a lot about physical movement. Creative expression is one of those ways. And so yeah, playing music, listening to music, any of those things where it's like joyful and playful, creative, that's a really great way to release stress and tap into that creativity that you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we wrap up, Dominice, you are a business strategist, podcast host, author, and a proud mom of two girls. So many roles. How do you balance it all? And how do you advise women to prioritize self care without guilt, especially when juggling family and work together?
Yeah. Thank you for this question. It's very timely. I'm going to share a very like honest and transparent answer. So
Mhm.
I am someone who's naturally very structured, very rigid. I love, calendars and scheduling. Like I lean into naturally just being more of an organized person in that way. And
Mhm.
so structure works really well for me. If you look at my calendar, I time block every week. Like I just am always I've always naturally been that way. The challenge with that is that it works really well for business and balancing all of the commitments and things that I have, but sometimes I can be too rigid where I don't allow myself to enjoy life as much because I'm so goal driven, I'm so ambitious in that way. I'm so structured that sometimes I can like put my head down and get very focused on the thing that I'm working on, and I can forget to come up for air and to prioritize things outside of, business. So when you ask the question about self-care,
Mhm.
think self-care is really about finding harmony, not necessarily balance, because I don't think that it's always going to be even to things in our lives, but it's
Yes.
about harmony so that all of the things flow together. So recently, I was going through a really tough period mentally. I was doing all of the things that we talked about today, but I was still having a really hard time. What I
Mhm.
realized was that I was not prioritizing joy, fun, play, any like childlike part of myself. I wasn't allowing that part of myself to come out. It was
Mhm.
like my inner child was rebelling because for 6 months or so, I had just been like super, super focused. And so, like, adult Dom was like, these are the things that we have to do. And I was doing those things every day, but I wasn't making time for things that I enjoyed. I wasn't making time for laughter and play. I had gotten too rigid. And so that's something that I've also seen with many other entrepreneurs, especially folks that are full time in entrepreneurship, because your livelihood is on the line. Like, sometimes it's a state of survival for some folks. And so what I would recommend is I definitely talked about like, making sure that you schedule things into your day, but the greatest piece of advice I can offer is finding harmony. Don't get so goal driven where you forget to live, right? Like make sure you make time for play and enjoyment and fun and like listening to music or painting, like some of the things that you've mentioned. Because even in those moments when you aren't doing per se, right, you're not working on the business, there's still a lot happening. Now that you've settled down, you're helping your nervous system to relax, and really, that I feel like is when we have our best ideas, when we have those best moments, those aha moments, those new business ideas. Most of the time, they come to us when we're relaxed and not working super hard. And so I just wanted to share that because I am actively now for the new year. I don't have a ton of goals that I've set, but my
Yeah,
intention for the new year is just to really have more joy in my life and to make sure that I prioritize that more.
exactly. Exactly. Great, great, Dominique. Thank you so much for such an inspiring, heartfelt, conversation, and sharing your wisdom and the, of course, powerful 4% formula. You have really shown us that success starts with mindset, movement, and spirit, and that we all have the power to break free from confusion and create lives that truly light us up. So if our listeners they wish to connect with you, explore more about your work and your coaching programs, how they can do that.
Yeah. So the first thing, thank you for having me. I want to say that first. I really enjoy this conversation and your questions today. The first thing is that for anyone listening to this, I work with women entrepreneurs, but the resource that I'm about to share, anyone can benefit from. I created a entrepreneurial clarity assessment, which is a 3 to 5 minute quiz that you can take. It's just yes or no questions. And it
Mhm.
asks you a series of questions about your like professional and business habits. So for anyone who's feeling stuck in business, and when I talk about stuck, it might be, feeling yourself getting stuck and taking the actions that you need to take, or maybe you're not seeing the results that you want to take in your business. Like if you feel like you've hit a wall almost, you're stuck in some way. And oftentimes we don't realize we can't really see the behaviors that are holding us back. And so when we talked earlier about the confusion loops, when I started having conversations with women, I was noticing similar patterns, similar like archetypes. And so I created a quiz, which essentially you answer questions and it gives you your entrepreneurial archetype, right? This is like your dominant characteristics as an entrepreneur. It tells you how that's holding you back and keeping you stuck, and then also gives you recommendations for what you can do to begin to shift out of that space. So if you're interested in taking the quiz, you can go to confusionloop.com, confusionloop, LOOP.com, and take that quiz. And again, it gives you personalized results for things that you can start doing today to get out of that cycle. And then if you just want general information about, my coaching program or, some of the other things that we've talked about today, you can go to my website, which is domrclifton.com, and learn more and connect with me there as well.
Lovely, lovely. We'll have all the details mentioned in the show notes for our listeners. And listeners, if you are or have been feeling stuck, take this as your sign to slow down, take a pause, reconnect, and become the person you need to be 1 hour at a time. And to learn more about Dominice's work and, to check her out coaching programs, refer to the show notes along with this episode. And thank you to everyone for tuning into the Mindful Living podcast. If you loved today's conversation with Dominiece, share it with a friend or your loved one or your family who might need some clarity and consistency in their life. And don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. Your support means the world to us. Until next time, take a deep breath, trust yourself, and remember, clarity begins with intention. This is your host, Sana, signing off. Thank you.